In this video, we are going to look at key factors affecting labor supply. Each of us must decide whether to work or not, and once employed, how many hours to work. At any point in time, the economy-wide labor supply is given by adding the work choices made by each person in the population. Choices. Total labor supply also depends on the fertility decisions made by earlier generations, which determine the size of the current population. So the second factor that affects the aggregate labor supply would be population. And migration laws existing in one country also contributes to the aggregate labor supply. To talk in more detail, individuals seek to maximize their well-being by consuming goods and spending time at leisure. Goods have to be purchased in the marketplace. Because most of us are not independently wealthy, we must work in order to earn the cash required to buy the desired goods. The economic trade-off is clear. If we do not work, we can consume a lot of leisure, but we have to do it without the goods and services that makes life more enjoyable. If we do work, we will be able to afford many of these goods and services, but we must give up some of our valuable leisure time. So when it comes to choices, we have to decide between number one, labor, and number two, leisure. We all have to make labor leisure choices, and all various decisions affect the labor supply of a country. We have seen that the labor supply is inelastic for an economy in the previous video because the labor force doesn't increase or decrease dramatically. The reason is population doesn't change fast and there are barriers to migrate. Here, labor force means number of people employed and the number of people actively searching for employment. However, labor supply for an industry or occupation is not inelastic. There are few key factors affect labor supply for an industry or an occupation, and we would see the list as we go along. For a product, if the price goes up, the firm would supply more to make more profits. Similarly, when wages are raised, it should boost the number of people willing to work and should increase the working hours in that industry. However, if there is a wage rate increase to the aggregate labor force, this may not be completely true. In the beginning, people would be willing to work for higher wages. However, as people become wealthier, they take more leisure and do less work. Thus, an increase in wages beyond some level by further raising wealth increases desired leisure, not labor. Workers thus work less as wages rise beyond some point. That's a key point to remember. But generally, when the wages go higher, the supply of a particular occupation or industry would also increase. If the working hours are less or flexible, then that industry might get more labor supply over the others. Also, if there are opportunities to boost earnings through overtime payments, that would be one of the key factors determining labor supply. The other important factor would be barriers to enter certain occupations. Artificial limits to an industry's labor supply through the introduction of minimum entry requirements can restrict labor supply and force pay levels higher. This is the case in professions such as legal services and medicine, where there are strict entry criteria. The number four would be there are some non-monetary characteristics of specific jobs include factors such as risk with different jobs, the requirement to work in non-working hours or non-social hours, or the benefits that certain jobs provide including job security, working conditions, opportunities for promotion, and the chance to live and work overseas, employer provided in-work training, employer provided or subsidized health and leisure facilities, and other in-work benefits including occupational pension schemes, and these really help boost the labor supply in one particular industry or occupation. And number 5 would be substitute occupations. The real wage rate on offer in competing jobs affect the wage and earnings differentials that exist between two or more occupations because people would see the relative wage rate compared to similar jobs. For example, an increase in the earnings available to trained plumbers and electricians may cause some people to switch their jobs. And finally, when there's a shortage in particular industry in a country, the country might attract foreign workers to fill the gaps. For example, in Sri Lanka, in tea plantations case, workers were brought from India to fill the shortage. There are a few factors that determine the labor supply in an industry that we saw in this video, and that concludes this one.